Good evening. You're either watching or listening to Redwood Wonk. I'm with David Frank. My name is Eric Kirk. We are talking national political news of the day, and we've just got to talk about, to begin with, how the campaign has devolved, and how politics have kind of devolved over the past couple of weeks to where we are having a second would-be shooter going after Trump, laying in wait for 12 hours in the bushes until a Secret Service member spotted him and shot at him, and he ran away. Secret Service is being criticized, but I'm not quite sure I share the criticism as much as it was certainly not as much as the last time around. But we'll talk about that a little bit. I mean, he was about a third of a mile away from the president. But we also have bomb threats in Springfield, Illinois, where the Haitian immigrants are that Donald Trump at his during the debate had the famous lines. Now they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating their pets. It's been put to music. There's all kinds of mocking videos all over the place. You go to YouTube and it's kind of hilarious. But unfortunately, as a result of that, and Vance, by the way, who kind of pushed this whole thing, is that there are bomb threats against schools, bomb threats against against hospitals in Springfield, and then every Nazi or far right group has decided to show up and march around to intimidate immigrants there. It's including the Proud Boys and actually the neo Nazis. And it's kind of a scary thing. So we've got this state where we're starting to get violent threats. I don't even want to say on both sides that some of these threats aren't even against campaign people. They're threats against immigrants. Unfortunately, Governor DeWine, I think, is like downplaying it, trying to say, oh, they came from overseas. And I'd like to see the evidence of that. I'd like to see how they know where it came from and what's happening. But either way, this whole thing it has been set up, and we'll discuss in this section and the next as we're discussing also the state of the race. I mean, is it the rhetoric, or is there something else going on here that is that is leading to something that could become serious? Now, I do have to say that Donald Trump was rattled by the experience of Sunday. It wasn't as close this time, but he actually received calls from both Biden and Harris. And he tried to bring up at the rally that, hey, he thought they were really nice, and there were boos as those names were mentioned, and jeering from his own audience. There's not a lot of room for nuance here or for humanity. We're at that phase of the race where Trump actually tried to show a little humanity, but his as far as it sounds like, his crowds don't want it. A lot to talk about here, Dave. Where would you like to go with this?
Well, thank you as always for that setup. I think this is one of those topics that we have where there's a lot of overlapping like Venn diagrams here. I think it's important to start with the fact that when, in the political discourse, in the sphere of political discourse, it's pretty intense, and it borders on disturbing when people speak with the rhetoric that is there's a concept called stochastic terrorism, which is when you're inciting people through dog whistles, and really you're basically saying things that if the wrong people hear it, it's going to inspire action. That's basically what it means. So yeah, there's always been heated political rhetoric. It's because the stakes are so high, going back to like the founding fathers. We had smear campaigns, and we had lifelong fights between some people that we consider political icons of our country. So this has always been part of democracy. So I'm not trying to hype it up that we are in some extraordinary period now, but it just feels more intense as it gets more intense, because we're only living once, and that's now, right? So I want to separate out the two things. One is the Ryan Ruth assassination attempt, lying in wait for President Trump. He was a troubled person, apparently. You never know how much of the stories that you read about these people in the various sources. You read 12 different places, you get maybe 4 or 5 different angles on a person. You can safely say that the guy was a little bit troubled, and for whatever reason, he decided he was going to make his mark, and that's very similar to the last attempt on President Trump. Back in Pennsylvania, Butler, Pennsylvania. So in both of those cases, it's people who were troubled, looking for an outlet for their angst, and this was how they chose to express themselves. Realistically, if it was left-leaning people, progressive people, democratic people, pro forces against Donald Trump, you could say that it was part of the political rhetoric that was driving the actions. But in both of these cases, they were people who were inclined to support President Trump, but they were, disillusioned with life, and that affected how they acted in a way that is a little scary, but it's a fact of life, unfortunately, these days. So that's one piece, that's one lane. The other thing that you talked about is what JD Vance and others on Trump's campaign have been doing to incite the people in Springfield, in Ohio, by vilifying a migrant population in a community that has about 60,000 people, that has seen an influx of thousands of Haitian migrants, responding to the demand for jobs. The employers of the community needed an influx of workers, and they tried. It was an overt act to try to get people to come there, and they
Yeah.
did. And the impact was not well received by the people that already lived there. So this is like just a small example. I don't mean small, but a singular example of that this tension that exists in communities across the country. So you've got rhetoric heating up people's rejection of the path that they're seeing not just our country, but like their community. So that's a ripe environment for political rhetoric, and we could talk more about the specifics, but I think
Sure.
that the consequence of that rhetoric was the hyperbole and the hype, and that freight train, that train left the station and then went way into threats of political violence, which there's this thing like doxing, when you reveal people's names and personal information to try to get people to target them and make threats to them. It's like a
Yeah.
power play. There's another thing called swatting, where you call the SWAT team, you call the police, and you report that something awful is happening, so hoping that the police will overreact and harm that person on your behalf as a troll. So I think this is obviously much greater degree, because it's playing out in our national news and the front pages of our newspapers, and it's hitting hundreds of millions of people in our country are potentially impacted by this. So anyways, it's a long way of getting at that it's sensationalism gone awry, and we just need to be temperate about it and call it out when we see it.
Yeah, I want to just spend a couple minutes talking about this cat eating, dog eating thing, because yeah, I go to research on it, and of course going on to I call it Twitter just to piss Elon Musk off, but onto X, and it's like some of the dark internet places someplace. Sometimes it's getting as bad as like 4chan and those groups, because they absolutely start posting videos and photographs that supposedly prove this stuff. Well, the video that kind of went viral does indeed show a black woman who was arrested for eating a cat, for killing a cat and trying to eat it. Well, this happened in Canton, Ohio, which is way on the other side of Columbus from Springfield. And the woman is not Haitian. She's an American citizen and seriously mentally ill. And it happened over a year ago. But this is being pushed around. People are saying, oh, wow, hey, we've got it on film. Trump was right. It's on television, blah, blah, then you've got the people, the 50, or they claim 50 people claim it. Well, if you have a Bigfoot sighting or a UFO sighting, you're going to get a lot of people claiming to see it too. What we don't have is camera of anything current in Springfield and done by Haitians. And that was brought up to and the woman who apparently started this thing by saying that an acquaintance of her neighbor's daughter had their cat eaten or something, and then saying that the media got that wrong. It was her daughter's neighbors. I don't know what it was, but she deleted her Facebook post on it. I said, "I'm not a racist," famous, last words, and I don't, and I didn't mean for all this to happen. But even after this, okay, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. But even after this, Trump is asked to whether he denounces the bomb threats, and he says, "I don't know anything about bomb threats," and then doubles down on the myth. And Vance continues to do so. Vance says, "These are my constituents. I know what I'm talking about." Governor DeWine actually comes on to say, "No, we don't have any evidence that that's happening." The local authorities are saying there's no evidence that it's happening, but everybody sees these videos on the internet, all of these particular groups, and this is how it happens. With the woman saying who started it, deleting her Facebook page. It's a lot like the guy who deliberately made up the conspiracy theory that Finland doesn't exist, and later came out and said, "I'm the one who started that," and they all just think he's part of the Swedish tourist department's lies, because it's on two peninsulas in Sweden that they're pretending that this country exists, right? And I mean, it's just, and he comes out and says it, and the people don't believe him. They think he's part of the conspiracy. So it boggles the mind, but that's what's happening here. But the irresponsible thing is that Trump and Vance are doing it, and they are maintaining it, and few Republicans are standing up and saying this is profoundly irresponsible. This is going to lead to violence. Instead, they're accusing Kamala Harris of inciting the two shooters by her rhetoric of calling him a fascist, although she never has called him a fascist, but saying that he's a danger to democracy. But the problem is he is a danger to democracy. He tried to overthrow an election, and granted, it was a lame plan, but it was a plan. It was an effort, but she's supposed to stop saying that, apparently, and all the surrogates are supposed to stop saying that, because apparently these two Republican shooters are being inspired by that. And of course, there's a lot of debate as to whether he's a Republican. This last guy, Rouse, voted for Trump in 2016, apparently supported Bernie in 2020, donated to Act Blue a bunch of times, but then more recently was posting saying that he would hope that that Vivaswamy would meet up with, was it not Tulsi? He supported Tulsi, but
Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley. Okay, so and that they would get together and run. He's all over the map. It's probably inappropriate to even associate him with a political ideology. He's got troubles. He's got a lot of troubles. He's got some pretty crazy anti-Chinese xenophobic theories that he refers to. But to say that this guy was in any way motivated by anything that Harris or Jon Stewart or anybody said is ridiculous. But we do we call upon them to tone down the rhetoric? He's not going to do that. Vance certainly isn't. The minute he's saying that Vance that the Democrats should be toning down their rhetoric because they're not the ones being shot at, a few minutes later he says that that if Harris has her way, she's going to lead the whole country into slavery. So, I mean, but unfortunately, the media I don't understand how the so-called liberal media gets sucked up into this stuff. Now, The Hill is granted a right of center Republican production, but they're calling on Harris to scrutinize her rhetoric and not talk about the threat to democracy.
Eric, so I think that I'm going to save my comments on that, on Harris and her rhetoric for the next segment, because we're going to focus more on that. Just to circle back a little bit to kind of wrap up things on the kind of where we are, the discourse that has elevated what starts out as a comment on a right wing channel online, and then a member of a neo-Nazi group, this guy from Blood Tribe. He then posts something, and then another neo-Nazi testifies in front of city council, and it starts to get traction. And then they march, and then they're marching against immigration, like any person wants your First Amendment rights to be respected. So people can dissent, people can say hurtful and hateful things. I think that the problem is that when it gets incorporated into the political discourse and the strategy of leadership, whether it's a community leader, a state leader, or national leader, and now it's like the highest, the one national race we have in our country, the presidential race. We've got Vice President J.D. Vance kind of doing what people have expected him to do, which is be a really aggressive spokesperson for the policies of former President Trump. But the way they're focusing on immigration is a obvious task is to incite fear. And so when you've got city government representatives saying this isn't actually happening, and the police are reporting this isn't actually happening, and but yet the media ecosystem becomes an echo chamber. So not just the people that are have the false claims that are trying to stoke up the hate and the angst and the anger and maybe this stochastic terroristic effect, not just that. But also all media, like everything that I've seen, whether it's independent media that I respect, whether it's mainstream media I respect, or whether it's mainstream media that we really ought to be a little bit more suspect about, it's amplified. Everybody's hearing it and seeing it, and it's because it's so effective. I think that it's really getting embraced, and that's a sad state of affairs. I think people need to really focus on holding leaders to account for their divisive and harmful language, but we're just not seeing that.
Real quickly before we go on, by the way, these immigrants are legal immigrants. It's an absolute lie. I mean, there may be illegal immigrants there, but the immigrants, the Haitians that were all brought in to work the jobs are legal immigrants.
It's a crying shame. I mean, my heart breaks for this community. There were children, elementary school children, who it was school photo day. You remember what that's like? Going to school on picture day? Who were dressed up in their best, got all ready, knew what they were going to wear the night before, and had to be evacuated. Children. A whole community put in fear.
All right, well, so we'll continue on this. I sort of commented on the whole rhetoric issue a little bit, but I'm going to let you kind of go into it a little bit as to what you think about the rhetoric. I'm not seeing a whole lot of hate rhetoric coming from the Harris camp. In fact, it's about the most disciplined campaign I've seen since maybe 2008 Obama. But what do you think?
I think an interesting place to start on that question, because like you pointed me in the direction of that Hill article, where it's basically, should Harris tone down her rhetoric? I have seen some Hill independent media sources covering this for the last few days also, and others, of course. But the Hill is definitely trying to be provocative, I think, in this instance, or at least one of their media, one of their journalists are.
Well, let me ask that. Are they trying to be provocative, or are they trying to be objective by basically having one candidate be here, another one here, and they think that they need to go in the middle between those, no matter how extreme one is? That's kind of what the media does a lot, but I'll let you comment.
Yeah, so I consider the Hill to be independent media. I consider it to be, and you've said that you think they're slightly to the right, which is fine. We can have a difference of opinion, whatever. It's fair and safe to say either, because we respect each other.
Sure.
But those independent journalists that I tend to follow regularly in the Hill space, they always have both sides represented. So they do. I believe they make a great effort through words and deeds for years to show both sides. And in many cases, they'll actually have like a Bernie person and a libertarian. So it's not even mainstream left and mainstream right. It's diverse voices. And so, the reason I mention this is because the facts should speak for themselves. And I think in this case they do. So you see a side by side of the call from vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance saying that this rhetoric must stop, that look at, these attempts on former President Trump's life, that it's because of Kamala Harris and it's because of the radical left, and calling them things, communist, Marxist, socialist, in the next frame right next to it, Donald Trump, former President Trump. So it's like it's in the side by side. You've got one effort to take the high ground and vilify the opposition, and then the other, someone punching low, punching down, and vilifying the opposition too. So it's a little bit hyperbolic or a little bit hypocritical to think that both sides aren't doing their own version of rhetoric. That's my first cut. But then the question is, well, what is that version of rhetoric? What are we talking about here? And again, you look at personally, I've got no skin in the game. I think both sides ought to use every tool in their quiver, right? Like I'm not. There's no objective reason why you don't do everything you can do to win. You ought to be legal, but it's like I said, it's literally the stakes are into the trillions of dollars. So I understand it, but facts should be facts. And when Kamala Harris says that Donald Trump has done encouraged January 6th through his rhetoric from post-election, from pre-election, from all the things that he's said and done and posted, that's not divisive. That's actually historically accurate. So the among other things, we could go down the list of things. Like I think that typically she's saying things that you can point to on video, on audio, things that Donald Trump's actually probably pretty proud of. So it is effective to hold up that mirror to the facts and say, these are the things that this person has said and done. Like, for example, the Supreme Court nominations that resulted in Roe v. Wade being dismantled, right? That he's proud of that. So if she is engaging in rhetoric on that, then it's effective. It's effective from an electoral strategy. And finally, one last thing on this before I hand it back to you. It's engaging voters where they are, right? So yeah, Harris is actually saying, these are the things that I want to bring to your attention so that you consider them when voting. Just like these are the things that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are saying, that they think that, for example, energy policy, immigration, taxation levels, like these are the things they're going to hammer. If the things that they say are true, like the ridiculous, millions of people that did come across the border, that's a real thing. So let's talk about that. If they're talking about how they cut taxes, trillions of dollars in taxes, talk about that. You did it when you were president. Good for you. Like tell people what you did. And like I said, other things like ending abortion. If you're proud that you did that, ending access to abortion because you've just had the Supreme Court, you've made the appointments to the Supreme Court, that's engaging their own voters where they are. For the media to step in and say that they ought not do that, I don't think that's fair, appropriate, accurate, or beneficial.
I think the Hill was specifically on the question of whether or not Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, and we all saw it happen in real time. I mean, we all watched exactly what he did, what he wanted to do, why he's mad at Pence for not helping him out, why he's mad at the courts for not helping him out. I mean, we watched it happen, and the concern is that if we just let it go and there's no consequences, political or legal, somebody else will do it. Somebody else will attempt it, and they won't rely on morons like Eastwood or Clark. They will rely on somebody who really knows how to hit the system at its weak points, and will possibly hold on to power against the will of even the Electoral College voters. But But what I also need to really point out is that, as I said before, Harris is really disciplined on this. She got into trouble early in Biden's presidency by responding to questions she wasn't prepared for, and in a way that was just kind of weird and invited even more criticism, because off the cuff she sometimes gets into trouble, especially if she gets rattled, and so they have worked on her. She is part of a team. She had a disciplined approach during the debate. In her interviews, she sticks to the script. I mean, she is not leaving anything up to chance with what she says. She pretty much, in the interview at the Black Journalists group a couple of days ago, she just didn't entertain anything off script. She went by it, and she's getting a lot of very unusual praise from people. Joe Rogan is amazed at her. He doesn't say whether he's going to vote for her or not. He just says, yeah, she kicked his butt. She's obviously listens to her team and is just being flawless. I don't see how she's going to lose, or it's and for Joe Rogan to be praising somebody like Kamala Harris. Now, I don't know who he's going to be supporting. He was supporting RFK Jr. That's no longer an option. Maybe he won't support anybody. But the point is that she's getting praised for this, for staying on message, attacking him and holding on. And as we discussed last week, she knew exactly how to bait Trump. And the reason that Trump is avoiding any debate, if he can, is because he knows he can't control himself. He knows that she's got his number. And he will do it again, and we'll find other ways to needle him because he cannot control himself. His rhetoric is a bit more concerning. Okay, I'm not going to be the hill where I'm trying to say it's both of them. I don't think it's her at all. Maybe there are a few surrogates out there saying things that might make certain people, but again, we're not seeing any left-wing shooters here. We're not seeing anybody, like you say, pro-choice shooters. There's nobody there. They all feel very strongly about it, but nobody is out to kill Trump. And I just think that an element of it is left-wing politics. People tend to see things as systemic, I think sometimes overly so, and they ignore the impacts of individual personalities, but they tend to not focus on it. Trump, to a lot of leftists, is a symptom. You won't solve anything by killing him. That's how leftists see it. It is not to say that there aren't leftist shooters. We know there are. The one who shot at the Congress members and that were playing baseball, softball, and all that. But it doesn't happen as much. I mean, it just really doesn't. If you were to go through all of the right-wing terrorist attacks and compare them to left-wing, I mean, even if you include the Weathermen and everybody in the 1960s, particularly since then, the vast majority of terrorism has been to terrorize abortion clinics or doctors. Shot and killed a couple of them, and against immigrants. The shooting in Pennsylvania against the synagogue. About 10 years ago, somebody went into a Unitarian church in Tennessee and started shooting at him, went liberal hunting. I mean, this is not the type of thing that tends to happen. Not to say that left-wingers are better people. It's just not the same type of manifestation of culturally that leads to this type of action. These two people, both the prior shooter and this guy, do not come from the left milieu by any stretch of the imagination. No matter how many times he gave to Act Blue, he supported Bernie because there is a sort of a strange element of white working class politics that can go back and forth between somebody like Bernie and Trump. There were a lot of people who did that in 2016. It's just the unusual nature of certain ideologies. I'm going on. I'm going to turn it back over to you, but it's just isn't the same pox on both sides. It's not. And nothing that Harris has said has incites violence. Nothing. Zero.
So thank you for that thoughtful laying out the issues. I think a couple things in response. Firstly, I think it's important to mention that you did point out that there are a lot of people, or at least a significant number of people, who would tend to think that Bernie Sanders would be a good president, but then when he wasn't the option, they shifted to Trump. And to a certain extent, it's a flip the table mentality when you have a system that you rage against, or that you have, what's the word? I guess I'll just stick with rage. Rage is cheap, right? Like, rage is visceral. So you have to pick somebody who is going to be constructive and engaging and nuts and bolts, hands on, thoughtful and effective, right? People thought that would be Bernie, but when that was disappointment, that the system actually was able to marginalize him so quickly, or at least his own party did, or the party he ran under. Then people thought, oh my goodness, look at this. And then enough people, not a huge amount, but enough people shifted. And I think this leads me to the second point of Joe Rogan. I thought Joe Rogan was there was an insight there that was worth mentioning when he was giving Kamala Harris credit for her tactics at the debate. And she just basically, he said that it was like jujitsu. She was so effective at saying, where's Trump's strength, where's his energy get diverted to, and which way she knew which way he was going to go. She just planted the seed and had him be his own worst enemy. Like in judo, if someone's charging at you and you get the leverage, and then you use their momentum and all their strength against them, and suddenly you're on top and in control. And so he, as a mixed martial arts aficionado and an announcer and a participant, he immediately recognized that, man, the judo was strong in this one, because it was 100% effective at embarrassing Trump in his own, he did it to himself. He took the bait every time. We've talked about this last week. So I think that insight is something that, people recognize that that's what happened. So what was the response to that? The response was that there was people saying, Trump himself was like, look at how much I won by. I blew it out of the water. He quoted some things that were, not realistically relevant. His spokespeople went out and said things that were also not realistically relevant, and they were changing the narrative. It's called the spin room for a reason. They were spinning the results. That's why last week I predicted that he wasn't going to agree to another debate, because he knows what happened there. And so with the bigger picture about violence and political violence, when we devolve to the level of trying to resolve our problems through violence, that's the worst case scenario. And I think that people recognize that. Anybody with a true, a level head, or that want the best for their children in the future, you can be harmed and you can be traumatized and you can be upset or stressed or angry. But we solve that in our country. It's a democracy. We solve that at the ballot box. We resolve it through debate and deliberation and effort and energy and hard work and making things better. We thankfully, the Civil War notwithstanding, we've been pretty good about evolving through knowledge and that comes in fits and starts, but the actual place we find ourselves now in is way, way, way closer to a new evolution of understanding, I believe. Even though we are like 50-50 and we're at the cutting edge, it just doesn't seem realistic to me that people are going to want to go down that road where anytime somebody has a problem, they're going to resort to going down that the dark side, so to speak, which just doesn't seem consistent with our values. So I think that leaders, their responsibility is to just point that out and hold that mirror up to people and say, if you want a better future for you and your family, we have to do this together. And I think that prevails ultimately.
I agree with you, and when I see this happening, and Vance is allowed to go out and say, well, it's Trump who's being shot at, nobody's bothering to shoot at Harris. It's like, I think you have to look in terms of, first of all, these are two people who were just way out. They aren't typical people. These are people who are deeply troubled, who went there. So to attribute anything like that to it is ridiculous. I'm just going to state here, right here and now, nothing Harris is doing is provoking violence. Nothing, not one word, not anything she is saying. And for the media, anybody in the media to call on her to calm down her rhetoric is being disingenuous. I'm sorry, just disingenuous. It's not. She's not a part of that problem.
Well, Whit, it shows that this race is very steady. Vice President Harris had a bump after she became the nominee, but the numbers are almost unchanged from before the convention. There you see them, 52% for Harris, 46% for Trump. Now, keep in mind, that is just barely outside the margin of error, Whit. And as you well remember, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the national vote but lost the White House. So that really shows you a race that is very close to statistically tied. In the battleground states, if you look at the 7 states that will really determine who gets elected, you look at there, you see Harris has a slight lead in 6 of the 7 states, but I say slight lead in virtually all of those. It is statistically tied within the margin of error. So again, this race is about as close as it can be.
So we're back once again. We talk about this on the show every few months because it comes up again. There are deadlines to fund the government. Again, we're not even talking about, I'm not sure if this is the same thing. I'm going to let you have your explanations as to the mechanics of it are so good, but basically we're not even talking about, money that is going to be spent. It's money that's already been spent to come into default. Is this what we're talking about, Dave?
Yeah, exactly. The money's already allocated. They just need the continuing resolution to allow the money to keep flowing that they've already agreed to spend.
And every time the Republicans make some demands for it that sometimes have nothing to do with the issue at hand of the budget. This time around, for instance, they want some election protection rules. I forget what it is, but that would
the SAVE Act.
What's that?
It's called the SAVE Act.
SAVE Act, right? The SAVE, and it's virtual signaling around the myth that there is like lots of active fraud going on, and it would mandate certain requirements for people to prove their citizenship, even though there's no evidence that a significant number of immigrants are voting. I actually did the research on the right-wing anti-immigrant sites. I've only found evidence of one undocumented immigrant who was caught trying to vote like almost a decade ago. The other immigrants who have tried to vote are legal immigrants, most of whom say they didn't understand that they weren't allowed to vote. Right, but if they're in the wrong place, like Texas, they're going to get nailed to the wall, even though the woman was a Republican, registered Republican. But so anyway, they want to attach that to be able to show that they've accomplished something, even though I think that analysts look at it and it wouldn't really change the rules all that much. And then there's a question as whether or not it would even be constitutional. So we've got that. We've got demands. They want to just set it over for 6 months till they can get past the election. And Democrats are saying we really need it for a year, and making the usual demands. And unfortunately, Mike Johnson was willing to cater to them, and it went in front of the House. I think they were hoping it could pass in the House, and then understanding that the Senate, it would never pass in the Senate. But it didn't even pass in the House because about a dozen of the fringe right wing voted against it. Boebert, Matt Gaetz, Nancy Mace, all voted against it for their own crazy reasons. 3 Democrats did vote for it. They are swing state Democrats, swing district Democrats that are in tough elections in some conservative areas of the country, including Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, who's I've been watching because she's in southern Washington State. It's a very conservative area. It was kind of a miracle that she won a couple of years ago. So I think she is wanting to show that she's not a party, that she follows the party line all the time. She's done that several times. I think she's made her point on that, but we'll see how it works out for her. But it went down and went down in flames. Right now, there is no B plan, and it's set to the government could collapse on October 1st. Trump is encouraging them to hold out until the SAVE Act passes, but absolutely Mitch McConnell and other people in the Republican Party do not want a shutdown at this point because, as in the past, according to the polls, the voters will hold it against the Republicans because of the dynamics. So I'm going to have you explain where we're at in a little bit more detail, and we'll talk about whether or not we're going to actually have a government shutdown right in the middle of the election season, the worst possible time for a lot of Republicans.
It's actually pretty wild. So thank you for that setup, as always. As you said, right, the budget, the fiscal year runs from October 1st through the end of September. So a federal budget year is about to end at the end of this month, and the next budget year starts on October 1st. Like we alluded to already, the Fiscal Responsibility Act that passed already approved funding through the end of this next year that starts in October through September 30th, 2025. So they've already agreed on the general size of the government and the allocation. It's just that they have to continue to prime to release the money. It's an anachronistic practice that really shouldn't even happen at all, because once you agree to spend the money, you should spend it. I mean, I think that's common sense when you've budgeted it and allocated it and you're telling people they're going to get it. So in addition to that, like why hold up money that you've already agreed to? Well, I wish it wasn't the case, but it's actually a political charade. So the Republicans control the House, and Speaker Johnson, in effect, he's doing the bidding of former President Donald Trump, and people who support him by trying to at least appear to hold the government hostage by refusing to fund it, in a sense, right? That technically they need to pass a continuing resolution, but they have to try because the Republicans run the House. They have to put it forward in order to do it. And so he's really being forced to walk this tightrope. And what his party is telling him, because of Trump, is telling them, and he controls the party now, the levers of power within the party, that they are demanding election reform, which is in effect considered absolutely unnecessary because it's already the case that non-citizens can't vote. So it's really a solution in search of a problem that doesn't exist. And the Brennan Center, which is like, the gold standard in this space, they've released a report that says, non-citizens voting, their research indicates there's 85 documented cases in the last 21 years.
Yeah.
These people already face jail time and deportation. It's against the law. The systems are in place to prevent it. It's a non-issue. It's a complete fabrication. So it's really a political team building practice. And then so why would they do this? They're doing it to show, well, we're standing up. We're not gonna let the government be this big and spend this much, and we just need to show everybody that we want to shrink the government down. So it's theater in that sense, and just combined with the anti-immigration rhetoric associated with Trump's 3-pillar strategy to become president. Immigration is one thing, and election integrity is obviously another one, because he's claiming that the election was stolen. So the rhetoric is for them to pile on and try to gain, put the finger on the scale in the presidential election. And so that doesn't fly. And I didn't mean to belabor this more than I needed to, but I think that's the factual point. But what's actually happening behind the scenes? turns out that the leaders, there are members of both parties, many members, particularly in the Senate, that they would not pass this. It's got no chance. And the Republicans there also don't want a shutdown. It bodes poorly for their chances to take over control of the Senate. If they're known as the party that shut down the government in the name of a fallacy, that maybe it riles up the base, but it doesn't bode well, particularly in the states that matter for them to gain control. So even the whip, John Thune, he's actually said, okay, Speaker Johnson is saying this is the only game in town, that he's going to pass this bill or nothing, but he couldn't get it passed. So we need that plan B, that plan C, where you pass a bill through 3 months, through the end of the year. The continuing resolution, the military, just needs to be funded. We just have to do this, all the things to keep the government moving. We got to do it till after the election. Let the next administration choose the priorities. If we're going to shrink government in any way, it's going to be under the new president. So some reasonable Republican senators are actually working with other, forces, I guess, to try to get a continuing resolution that will help both parties avoid being blamed for something that's absolutely unnecessary.
Yeah, although why are the Democrats not agreeing to a 6-month extension? I mean, is it because they feel like they're in the driver's seat here, or because that's kind of what they've been? We do this twice a year. What is their objection to that?
Well, Speaker Johnson's saying that the only bill he's going to put through, put forward, is that SAVE Act is attached to it. So it's a 6-month extension with the SAVE Act, which no Democrats are ever going to support that. And they're saying you don't even need this. We already have the money's already, the continuing resolution is a formality. So we're not going to concede that we need to do this on your terms, and so instead, let's do what both parties want. And in the Senate, people are saying, let's just get it through the end of the calendar year, because that's something we all can agree on, and then we can discuss the other things with the next administration.
Oh yeah, I mean they want to be able to gain leverage over Senate Democrats to get their changes when it comes, assuming that the Democrats hold on to the Senate. But I mean, it failed. Why do you think that the 12 Freedom, well, I don't know if all of them were Freedom Caucus, but I just recognize a number of them from that. Why do you think they voted against it?
So there's two thoughts. I actually thought about this a lot, and at first I was like, it's just to be in the limelight, it's just the theater, but it's probably more than that. It's probably a little bit more than just the theater. One is that they're saying, look, this government is harmful in its priorities and its spending, and we don't want to give an inch to Biden. We don't want him to have any success, and so if we pass this, then it's just business as usual again. And it's important for us to showcase that we need to, we're gonna thumb our nose in the face of this system and shut it down when we can.
I see that, and Johnson holds the cards in terms of nothing can come to the floor without him. That's the power that he has, because I think if he was to allow the Democratic proposal to come to the vote, there would probably be a bunch of people in close races, including a bunch in Southern California, who might just break away from the party to save their own butts. I mean, it's they're the ones that are looking bad at this. Those 12, assuming they're all like Boebert and Gates, they're in districts where they don't have to worry about getting reelected. They've got it's like way in their favor. Notice that Marjorie Taylor Greene is not on that list. I think she's trying to make a play to earn respectability by moving slightly to the center, although she still says weird things. But
she didn't. Sorry to interrupt you. She didn't vote for it. She just voted present.
Right. Oh, there you go. Okay.
And others too, like Thomas Massey as the other. Right. I had to be reminded that I was just, it's one of those things where
we're the moderate Republicans in this, because a shutdown will probably kill a bunch of them, and almost ensure that the Democrats take over the House. They have to understand this. Mitch McConnell understands it. Johnson just doesn't want to lose his spot like previous, like McCarthy, apparently. But we don't have a whole lot of time left. But where do we go from here? Where are they going to go?
Well, you're foreshadowing my prediction, I suppose. But I think there's only one way to go, which is the same way that Johnson went each time he was faced with this question. When he needed a continuing resolution, he passed it. When he needed to pass the Fiscal Responsibility Act, they passed it. He's in a tough spot because I think his not that I have that much empathy for him, but he's very conservative, and he very much wants to hang, to support and his party and his party leadership. That's just his lane. That seems to me genuine and sincere. Yeah. But when you have the weight of every senator basically breathing down your neck, that look, it doesn't work like that. We're at war in places that need money. We all the things, like every business needs the predictability of the revenues coming in, like government service contractors. There's huge portions of the economy, the healthcare system, education, police, fire, all the things. Like federal government funding helps keep communities afloat. So just the ripple effects of shutting down the federal government's purses, they're small at first, but they can compound and they could can be extremely harmful. So I think that Johnson at the end of the day, sort of has to take the high road to just keep the government going. Let's see what happens at the election. I think that's what he ends up doing.
I think so too. I just don't see, and the question is, will he be willing to vote with the Democrats and a small number of Republicans, to be able to bypass that? And would that mean the end of his speakership? I mean,
he's done it before, so we could say that. Yeah. But right now, I would imagine that right now Trump is like, the words are, the quotes are out there. I probably could find one. I know we just have a couple minutes, but Trump said if Republicans don't get the SAVE Act and every ounce of it, they should not agree to a continuing resolution in any way, shape, or form. Like, he's drawing the line, but he's not gonna. What can he do? What can he actually do?
There are senators that are already angry at him that they didn't get this draconian border bill. That was passed. They're never going to get it. We've talked about it on the show before. They're never going to get one like that again. Republicans got to be, hey, that was an opportunity because the Ukraine funding was caught up in it. They successfully had basically muscled the Democrats into this, but Trump didn't want to win for him. He, for Biden. Period. End of story.
Eeny, meeny, chili beanie, the spirits are about to speak.
Are they friendly spirits?
Friendly? Just listen.
Well, David, this brings us to our predictions. What do you have for us?
Well, again, this, surprise, surprise, this is my prediction relating to the budget standoff. I think it's political theater. And according to relevant experts and organizations that are knowledgeable, there is no election integrity issue that needs to be addressed by a line in the sand passage of this SAVE Act. But the confidence of the American people is shockingly low. When asked, less than half people in battleground states, 7, I think, of the battleground states, less than half the people have confidence that the elections will be safe and secure. So the rhetoric is effective, and that's why I think the standoff is just being so intense right now with Speaker Johnson walking the tightrope. But because they've already agreed to spend the money, and behind the scenes, many members of the House and the Senate who do not want this spectacle to continue and do not want the government shutdown to impact the lives of real people, I predict that there will be a 3-month continuing resolution funding the government through the end of the year.
All right, I'm actually going to make a kind of a wild prediction here. Trump has said that he will not show up for a second debate. No second debate. He got his clock rung in the first one, and he's afraid that it'll happen again for reasons we've discussed. The problem is that, I know Nate Silver had said there wasn't much of a bump, but you really need to look to a week after a debate or something like that to see stuff baked in. And we are seeing movement on the national level for the in terms of it, including a couple of key polls that are outside of the margins of error. Now, again, we could run into situations where the polls are actually show worse for Trump than actually shows up, because a lot of Trump people don't like to answer poll questions. But we also I'm seeing no discussion of the Dobbs effect. That could be a wash. It's bringing in a lot of young people, particularly women, who don't fit into typical likely voter calculations. So, but he is falling behind. There is movement. I mean, you go to the 538 site of the Real Clear Politics site, and it's blue. She's got leads of anywhere from 2 to 7 points. The statistical analysis is that if she wins the popular vote by 2 points or less, she only has about a 20% chance of winning the Electoral College. That increases to about 75% from 2 to 4% or 60% or something like that, and then about 80% of anything over 40% in terms of winning it. She's up there. And if you look at all of the swing state votes, she is pulling ahead in the Rust Belt. She's doing very well in some of the Sun Belt, particularly Georgia, and she's really close in North Carolina, ahead in Nevada, about even in Arizona. But then all of a sudden, out of the blue, it's getting kind of even in Florida, close in Texas, and Iowa, of all places. So all this being said, if the polls continue to go in this direction, Trump is going to have no choice but to push for a second debate, because he's got to do something to change it. He's terrified. He'll probably get clobbered again. But that's my prediction, is that he's going to be pushing for a new debate. And who knows if he waits until October, if Harris will be in the mood for it. She might say, no, you had your chance. We'll see. But either way, until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.